The first woman admitted to the trans-allegheny lunatic asylum was committed for domestic troubles. That was 1864. The building she walked into was made of hand-cut blue sandstone, 4 stories tall, nearly a quarter mile from end to end. It had been designed with 921 windows so that natural light could reach every room. The ceilings were 12 feet high. The hallways were wide enough that patients could walk without brushing the walls. The man who designed it believed the building itself could cure people. That sunlight and fresh air and the dignity of space were medicine. He wasn't wrong to try. What he didn't account for was what happens when a system built for 250 people absorbs 2,600. What he couldn't have known was what the state of West Virginia would eventually decide to do inside those walls when the rooms ran out of room and the money ran out of patience. The building still stands in Weston. The question of what it did to the people inside it has never been fully answered. Thomas Kirkbride was a Philadelphia psychiatrist who believed that the mentally ill were being warehoused in jails and almshouses and left to rot, and he was right. The system he proposed was different. Patients would have private rooms. They would work on the farm, tend the dairy, make their own furniture and clothing. The institution would be self-sufficient, and the patients would be part of that. Not prisoners, but people learning a trade, getting sun, breathing clean air. Trans-Allegheny was built to that vision. Construction began in 1858, interrupted by the Civil War, completed in 1881. The grounds covered 666 acres. There was a working farm, a dairy herd, a water reservoir, a greenhouse, an ice plant. At the center of it stood a 200-foot clock tower. It was, by any measure of its time, an extraordinary place. The first patients arrived to wide hallways and abundant light. For a brief window, it may have worked exactly as intended. That window did not stay open long. By 1880, less than 2 decades after opening, the building held 717 patients. The number kept climbing. By 1938, it was 1,661. By the late 1940s, it had crossed 1,800. At its peak in the 1950s, records show between 2,400 and 2,600 people living in a space designed for 250. Rooms built for 1 held 4 or 5. The hallways that were designed to give patients room to walk were now packed with beds. The windows that were supposed to fill the place with light now looked out over a campus that couldn't keep up with itself. A 1938 survey by a national medical organization described the patient population in terms that tell you everything about what the building had become. Epileptics, alcoholics, drug addicts, people deemed mentally defective. Not a hospital treating illness, a holding facility absorbing anyone the state didn't know what else to do with. In 1949, the Charleston Gazette sent reporters inside. They described what they found as looking like a hog pen and smelling worse. Insufficient heat, no furniture in whole wings, patients warehoused in the dark. The superintendent of the hospital, somewhere in the 1940s, wrote in his annual report that appealing to the state legislature for funding had become pointless. His entry that year was the shortest on record. The longer he stayed, the less he believed anyone was listening. The asylum's admission logs from the 1860s through the 1880s are still on record. They show patients committed for reasons that have nothing to do with mental illness as we understand it today. Domestic troubles, laziness, egotism, jealousy, superstition. Women committed by husbands, men committed by families who had run out of patience or simply run out of options, children with Down syndrome, disabled veterans from the Civil War who came home to a country that had no system for them and no framework for what they were carrying. The building absorbed all of it, and because the institution was designed to be self-sustaining, many of those people never left. They worked the farm, tended the dairy, made the mattresses. They were treated or not treated, or forgotten about entirely. When they died, the staff notified the next of kin. Families frequently did not respond. The unclaimed were buried in the cemetery on the grounds. Their gravestones, accounts describe, bore only a patient number, no name. Over time, even the markers disappeared. More than 2,000 people are buried on that hillside today. Most of them cannot be identified. A project to recover their records and restore their names is still ongoing. It has been ongoing for years. Most of these stories don't get told twice. If this channel disappears from your feed, the algorithm won't bring it back. Subscribe so the next one finds you. In the early 1950s, Walter Freeman arrived at the state hospitals of West Virginia with a proposal. Freeman was the physician who had popularized the transorbital lobotomy, what most people call the ice pick method. The procedure involved inserting a narrow steel instrument into the corner of the eye socket, driving it through the thin bone behind the eye with a mallet, and moving it back and forth to sever the connections in the brain's frontal lobe. It was performed without surgical anesthesia. Patients were rendered unconscious first through electroconvulsive shock, a seizure induced by electricity, and then operated on. Freeman had developed a system that made the procedure fast. He could move from patient to patient. He charged $25 each and sometimes performed them in front of an audience. What he brought to West Virginia was not a rogue experiment. The West Virginia Lobotomy Project was launched with the formal cooperation of the State Board of Control. The state approved it. The purpose, as described at the time, was to reduce overcrowding. Across West Virginia's state hospitals, Freeman performed roughly 900 lobotomies over the course of the project. The building in Weston was one of the sites. The patients who survived the procedure were, in many cases, altered beyond recognition, unable to care for themselves, unable to speak in the ways they once had. The overcrowding problem did not go away. The hospital stayed open until 1994. By the 1980s, newspaper investigations were describing patients naked in filthy wards, bathrooms smeared with waste, staff outnumbered to the point where supervision had effectively collapsed. Violence between patients went unaddressed. The building that was designed to hold 250 people had spent decades holding 10 times that, and the accumulated weight of that was visible in every corridor. When it finally closed, the remaining patients were transferred to a newer facility down the road. The building sat empty. It was sold at auction in 2007 for $1.5 million, bought by a demolition contractor who reversed course and began restoration instead. Today, it runs historic and paranormal tours. The cemetery on the grounds is still there. A nonprofit has been working for years to recover the names of the people buried in it, pulling patient records, cross-referencing death logs, trying to return names to graves that have none. The work is slow. The records are incomplete. The number of people who went in and never came out is not precisely known. What stays with you, standing in the long hallways of that building, is not the scale of the worst things that happened there, but the distance between what the place was built to be and what it became, and how long that distance went unaddressed by the people who had the power to close it and how the building itself, the windows, the wide corridors, the 12-foot ceilings, the light that floods the rooms on a clear morning, still carries the original intention even now, as if the stone remembers something the institution forgot somewhere around 1880 and didn't recover. There are more than 2,000 people buried on the hillside behind it who came to that place seeking some version of care, or were brought there by families who had run out of other answers, or were deposited there by a state that had decided warehousing was close enough to treatment, and most of them left nothing behind that can be found now. No marker, no name, just a number that was later lost on a hill that is still being searched, in a town in West Virginia where the clock tower still keeps time. Stayed with you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, The Stories America Left Behind.